This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can visit their store by using my referral link in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm Nizzanotes, and today I'm bringing you a new video in a series that I think I'm going to call Nizzanotes. And this is going to be a series where I talk about the current limited format, sort of my notes about the format so far, if you will. People have often asked me in the past, I do a limited set review, and then I do a video at the end of the format. I'm like, hey, here's what I got wrong and why. And people often want to know what I think about a limited format in between, before we play the format and after we've drafted it dozens of times. And this is something I do like on my streams, but that's obviously sort of it's embedded within a 2-hour video of me playing Magic, as opposed to a more direct kind of video. And I thought I would start doing sort of an unscripted series where I have notes, as the name would imply, and sort of just talk about, how I feel about the format. And this first video in this series, I'm of course talking about Innistrad Midnight Hunt. I'm just going to give my picks for the 3 best commons and the best uncommon in each color. This is sort of a Cliff's Notes version of my set review where I talked about literally every card in the format, but I'm sort of distilling it into a smaller video for people if they don't have time to watch hours of me talking about every single card in the set. This is sort of a good way to get ready to play on Arena, just came out on Arena, and get ready to play at your pre-release. That is much more bite-sized than what I would normally do. So let's start with white. We'll go in Wooburg order, and I think the best white common is Search Party Captain. This card is really, really good. You would play a 4-mana 2/2 that draws you a card in a lot of limited formats. Wouldn't be great, but this does way more than that. For one thing, it's frequently going to cost less. I mean, that's the big thing. It'll cost less, but sometimes it'll cost significantly less. If you attack with one thing, it's 3 mana and you're getting a good deal. Once you get down to 2 mana, you're getting an insane deal. And once you get down to 1, it's just silly. And 2 and 1 won't happen all the time, but they'll happen often enough. And when you can do it, you're often going to be able to double spell and draw the card play the card you draw. Unless it's a land and you've already played a land, but it will often allow you to get a 2-for-1 and give you some powerful turns for a common. It's a card that could have easily been uncommon and it wouldn't have seemed that strange. That's how good it is. I think the next best white common is Candle Trap. In every set, white gets a pretty good removal spell that's an aura, and that's what Candle Trap is here. So, it's an interesting one. In a lot of formats, the aura removal spell would have been above Search Party Captain, but that's not really true here because the base of what this does just isn't amazing. Candle Trap giving something Defender for 1 mana isn't a bad deal, but the fact that that creature can still block is a huge pain. And you can't fully remove the card until later when you get Coven going. So if you're a really aggressive deck, Candle Trap isn't the best removal spell because you don't want things blocking you. Even if they can't do damage to your creatures, it doesn't matter. It's going to slow you down. But if you're in more of a mid-range or control deck or a green-white deck that can easily get Coven, it gets to be better because you can just get rid of the creature entirely. But the fact that, it's not that great in an aggressive deck despite only costing 1 white mana does sort of tell us that it's not quite as premium as something like Pacifism and other cards like that we've seen. Still a great white common. And I think the third best white common is Clarion Cathars. So this card gives you a 3/3 and a 1/1 for 4 mana. We see that card a lot, and it's usually pretty nice. And it's going to be extra good in this format, mostly because it ticks the box on a lot of different decks in the format. It's not a bad card to have in an aggro deck where you can go a little wide. It's good at getting you Coven in green-white. In the aggro deck, by the way, is when I say aggro in this format, I mean red-white. The Coven deck is in green-white, and this gives you 2/3 of Coven for 1 card. And then black-white is a sacrifice deck. So, having 2 bodies, including a 1/1, which is kind of worthless by the later part of the game, is great for the sacrifice deck. So it just ticks a lot of boxes. It has extra synergy here in pretty much every white archetype, and I think that's what makes it extra valuable to me, and I think it is the third best white common. So now I'll tell you about what I think is the best white uncommon, and that is Borrowed Time. So, white didn't get maybe a premium removal spell at common, but it got an amazing one at uncommon, one that deals with any non-land permanent. And yeah, it has the usual downside these kinds of cards have, but the upside's worth it. Your opponent can remove it, sure, but you're still trading 1 for 1 in that scenario. And if they don't remove it, you just get an amazing removal spell that's very efficient and good at dealing with pretty much anything. And it's easily white's best uncommon. If I were looking at these cards in a pack 1, pick 1 scenario, I would be happy to first pick Search Party Captain as well as Borrowed Time. The other two cards I talked about, I wouldn't be nearly as thrilled to first pick, even though they are quality commons. Let's talk about blue now. The three best blue commons. Let's start with the one that I think is the third best, and that is Locked in the Cemetery. So this gives us another aura that's a removal spell that's making the top commons list for one of these colors, in this case, blue. Locked in the Cemetery is a lot like Candle Trap, actually, in that early, it's kind of okay, but not great. And then in the later part of the game, it can do some more impressive stuff because you can fully lock down creatures with it. Before you have enough cards in your graveyard, you're often going to have to take a hit from something before you play it, and that's never a great deal. And that's what sort of keeps it, at the third best blue common, instead of, as you might see in some formats like this aura removal spell, being the second or even first best blue common. I think the second best blue common is Bait Hook Angler. So this is a card that, at face value, I don't think looks that impressive. You get a 2-mana 2/1 on one side, and then it can disturb out of your graveyard into a 1/2 flyer for 2. And, that isn't that exciting. But when you really think about the efficiency here, it's pretty impressive. There aren't really any other of these disturbed creatures that can come back so cheaply and be cast so cheaply on the front, too. So you get 2 bodies pretty quickly with this one. You don't have to wait it out. And again, yeah, the bodies aren't impressive, but this format has a number of ways to take advantage of this sort of thing. Blue-white has various things that pay you off for disturb in the first place. Meanwhile, blue-black has various sacrifice things it wants to do, and it can sacrifice either side of this, and it's only half a card you're using up. And, in addition to that, it's really not that hard to trade with the 2/1 up front and then use the 1/2 in the air to sort of, deal damage to your opponent throughout the game. But there is extra value in the fact that this gives you 2 bodies. The best blue common, I think, is Organ Hoarder, and it's kind of funny because it and Search Party Captain have some serious similarities here. It is a 4-mana 3/2, which isn't impressive, but it draws you a card, and even more than that, it gives you serious card selection. You look at the top 3 cards, and you pick the best one, and then the others go into your graveyard, which means you can be throwing in things with Disturb and drawing something that doesn't have it, or things with Flashback. And all of that is really appealing. This, kind of like Search Party Captain, feels like it could have been an uncommon because it gives you such powerful card selection and graveyard filling. Really not that hard to 2-for-1 with it, but it's a common, and that's pretty good. All right, so I think the best blue uncommon is Overwhelmed Archivist. I think a lot of these Disturb cards are good. It was sort of hard to choose one of these Disturb uncommons because they're all really good, which one I like the most. In the end, I think it was Overwhelmed Archivist because it's good on both sides. 3 mana for a 3/2 that loots when it comes into play is something you would play in basically every limited format ever, especially one with graveyard stuff going on like this one. And what really sells me on this one is when it disturbs, it may not come back as the most imposing creature ever, but a 2/1 flyer that loots every time it attacks is a big deal. You're going to continue to improve your card quality, you're going to continue to load your graveyard, and you're going to get a ton of value here. A 2/1 flyer is a very real body that can threaten in the air too. Overwhelmed Archivist, my pick for the best uncommon. So out of all of these, the cards that I would be happy to first pick, certainly Overwhelmed Archivist and certainly Organ Hoarder. I'm a little more on the fence about Bait Hook Angler. It depends on just how good this 2 bodies turn out to be, but I think right now, it may be in a really weak pack, I'd first pick the Angler, and that's probably kind of true of Locked in the Cemetery too. So I think blue's doing pretty well here on its best commons and uncommons. All right, let's move to black now, where I'll talk about the 3 best commons, which I think the third best common is Diregraph Horde. So this thing gives you a ton of bodies and stats for only 5 mana. Like 5 mana for a 3/4 and 2 2/2s is insane. Those 2/2s, though, do have decay, which means, they can't block and they can only attack once and then they die. But you're still getting 3 bodies for 1. The zombie deck is all about having all of these extra bodies and sacrificing them to various things, and that's the blue-black archetype. Meanwhile, the black-white archetype can make use of all these bodies pretty much the same way. It doesn't care whether or not they're zombies is the key difference. It just likes having these extra bodies around. And, if your opponent's at like 10 and you play this on turn 5, it's a pretty real pressure play. Sure, they can only attack once, but I think they're going to be able to do damage often enough and be enough of a threat frequently enough that they're kind of a problem. Even though the most value you're going to get out of it is, of course, if you're sacrificing it and stuff like that. I think the second best black common is Olivia's Midnight Ambush. This is premium removal. It wouldn't be if it was only ever the -2/-2 mode, but it's frequently not going to be. And when it's not doesn't just have upside, it just becomes kill target creature more or less, and that is incredibly strong. Defenestrate, I have at number 1. It's premium removal too. Of course, black's 2 best commons are removal, right? And Defenestrate is very good removal. It can't kill everything. I think people get hung up on that a little bit too much when they see cards like this. Anytime we see a removal spell that's like, there's one small category that I can't kill, they're really good. I mean, look at Doomblade, look at Go for the Throat. We have a card in just about every format that like can't kill something but can kill most things, and it's always really good, and that's what we have here with Defenestrate. It's premium removal. And I think Black's best uncommon, also a removal spell, Infernal Grasp, which can kill anything at the cost of 2 life and 2 mana, which is a great deal. So with Black, I'd be perfectly happy first picking Defenestrate and Infernal Grasp, and I can see situations where you first pick Olivia's Midnight Ambush or Diregraph Horde too, depending on how weak the pack is. So Black is looking pretty good with its best commons and uncommons. All right, let's move to Red now. Well, I'll talk about my 3 picks for the best commons first. At number 3, I have Ardent Elementalist. You've seen a theme throughout this video that I really like cards that are 2-for-1s, and Ardent Elementalist is another one. Gives you a 4-mana 2/1 body that can trade for a lot of stuff, and then it rebuys you an instant or sorcery from your graveyard, which is a big deal, especially in the blue-red deck, which is all about spells. Burn the Accursed is my number 2 red common. Normally this spell, this 5-mana deal 5 to something, isn't amazing in limited, but I think this does enough other stuff that it really matters. It does 2 to your opponent, which will trigger various things for the black-red deck that likes it when your opponent is damaged. And it exiles the creature you kill in a format where that's really relevant. So I think this does enough. I don't really quite think it's premium removal. I wouldn't call it that, but it's nice removal, and you'll play 1 copy of this in basically any red deck. You kind of hope you don't have to play more than 1, but if you need removal, it can do the job. And the best red common, and this one's not really a surprise, it may just be the best common in the set, and that is Moonrager's Slash, which is, as people are calling it, Lightning Bolt. It will be 3 damage for 3 mana at instant speed pretty often. That would already be really good and might still be Red's best common on this list, either way. And some of the time it's just going to be Lightning Bolt, and that's crazy. So it's an incredibly good common. And the best red uncommon for me is Cathartic Pyre, another removal spell. 2 mana to do 3 to something at instant speed is great. It has this additional upside where you can, rummage a little bit. Most of the time that's not going to matter, but there will be situations where, what you really need to draw isn't your Cathartic Pyre, and it lets you dig a little deeper, and it's nice to have that upside on an already really impressive card. All right, let's wrap things up now with a look at green. I think the 3rd best green common is Duel for Dominance. So, green usually gets like a premium fight spell at common. I don't quite think Duel for Dominance is that. It is a good fight spell, but I don't quite think it's premium. The main reason is a lot of the time it'll just be fight at instant speed for 1 generic and a green. And while that's fine, if you've played a lot with these sorts of spells, you know that just adding any stats boost to them makes a world of difference, and not having one is a big deal. Now, you will get that stats boost, and it's even a permanent one, a +1/+1 counter if you have Coven, and I could see if Coven is really, really easy to get as we move through this format, Duel for Dominance moving into that premium rating, but for now, I think there's enough setup required that I don't love it. I do still think it's Green's 3rd best common, though, which is pretty good. I think Green's 2nd best common is Dawnheart Rejuvenator. We've seen a card lot like this before. 4 mana, 2/4, gains you 3, taps for mana of any color. We've actually seen this exact card, except that it was a different creature type. And it was pretty good. It gives you good fixing, gives you good ramp. It's even kind of an okay defensive body, and the life it gains you gives you more time to utilize the mana that it's going to produce for you, and all of that's pretty nice. And I think the best green common is probably Shadow Beast Sighting. So, just like I've been talking about these Disturb cards, sometimes maybe they're not the most efficient when you bring them back, but the fact is, you're getting 2 things out of 1 card, and that's what you got here too. Up front, you get a 4 mana 4/4, which is something pretty much any limited deck would play anyway, and then in the late game, you can crank it out of your graveyard. Sure, it's expensive, but the idea is that you're sort of in the late game, flooding out, and everything you can do is just stuff in your graveyard, and that's gonna happen. We've seen enough graveyard mechanics, including Flashback before, that we know that's gonna happen, and when that's true, it really gives you some serious flood insurance and a really real way to add to the board. And I think Green's best uncommon overall is Hound Tamer. So this has a baseline as a 3 mana 3/3 trample. You'll play that every time you get it, especially if it's monocolored like this. And then it also has the ability to put +1/+1 counters on things. So you'd definitely always play that. And it doesn't even end there, because this thing's a werewolf and it can transform into a werewolf that is bigger and also gives your werewolves trample in addition to holding on to the ability to put counters on stuff. And that's really incredible. Just having the threat of activation on your Hound Tamer is often going to make it impossible for your opponent to block. This is just a great 3-drop and incredibly powerful creature. With green, right now, I have to say, I'm not super enthused about the idea of first picking any of those commons, Shadow Beast Sighting, Dawnheart Rejuvenator, or Duel for Dominance. But the idea of first picking Hound Tamer, that's going to happen a lot in this format. It's often going to be better than most rares and mythic rares, and that's pretty impressive. So that does it for this first edition of Nizzanotes. Let me know in the comments if you think that name is awful. I'm not really sure how I feel about it, frankly. But, that's what I'm going with for now. Going forward, this series won't necessarily be an every week kind of thing, but I'm going to try to put out an episode at least every week or every 2 weeks when I have something new to say about the limited format. I'll probably have another one next weekend after I've played the format a significant amount. Also, let me know in the comments topics you'd like to see me talk about in this series. Also, if you're looking for my set review or any other videos, you should see some playlists on your screen shortly. And also, if you want to give back to the YouTube channel, if you feel like you've gotten something out of it and you want to give back, you can on Patreon. So, check that out, and thanks for watching.